Hi, yes, is this the DC collection department? How did I get your number? I have my ways. Anyway, look, I'm doing my flash reading order for the Omnibuzz Cafe, and we got a problem here. There is no Bronze Age stuff. No Bronze Age zombies. No Carrie Bate zombies. Come on. He wrote over 150 issues. How have you guys not made this yet? Yeah, you'll get to it. I know. You gotta print out like 45 Batman books first. Yeah, I get it. Okay. All right. Thank you. Guess we're gonna have to go with singles. And welcome back, everyone. Today we'll actually be talking about the Bronze Age era of the Flash, which was written mostly by the writer known as Cary Bates. He would write, he would be on and off for the book about the first 9 or 10 issues, but then would stay on around 209, and he will write the Flash from 209 all the way to 350, which would be the last issue in this particular volume before we do a new volume with a new Flash, but we'll get there in the next episode. But anyway, yes. So unfortunately, though, like I said, I don't have a lot of omnis to work with, so we're going to be working with some of the singles I have. I'm not going to show off every single single I have because, again, it's 150 issues. We want to be here all day. So I'm just going to show off some significant issues, as well as a particular hardcover, which is significant and has a significant story. But I want to start with this story first, which is The Flash 203, which is pretty cool because it starts with Flash talking with Superman, and Flash kind of relates to Superman in this issue. Not particularly Barry himself, but someone close to his wife Iris, who would find out an actual truth, a certain truth about her past, where she is Iris West, but originally she was known as Iris Russell. We come to find out in this issue that Iris is actually from the future. She's actually from the year 2970. So she is long from the future. And what happened is similar to Superman's upbringing. The world was gonna collapse. Thankfully, it didn't. There was a lot of nuclear explosion and all that, but basically everything turned out fine for the most part. It was still taken over by a villain. The Flash would deal with him at the end of the issue, but basically very similar to Superman's origin. Iris's parents decide to send her off, not just on a different planet, but through a different time, which ends her up all the way into as the time these comics were going on, into the 60s, into the 70s. But of course, as we know with comics, you know how time goes. Point is, they take her all the way to the past. And this is a pretty cool story. I do like this origin for Iris. This is something that would stay on for a good while. It would get retconned eventually, but this would last for a good while. And it actually becomes a very key component at the end of this run. The next significant issue I want to talk about is we're gonna jump a little bit. We're gonna go from 203 to 250. And what's significant about this issue is that this is actually the debut of the Flash villain known as the Golden Glider. Now, Golden Glider, she is Leonard Stark's sister, Captain Cold's sister. And she is a pretty cool villain. She ice skates, does that, and later on in the New 52, she'll become a transitional ghost. So she'll do that. But what's cool about this is that Cary Bates created this character, and honestly, she became a pretty big character in this run, to the point where she actually at one point does find out that Barry is the Flash, and almost uses that against him, and she pulls a lot of stuff on Barry, almost to a point where there's a whole storyline later on where she kind of almost sabotages Barry and Iris' marriage, where she gets this other superhero involved and tries to make Iris fall for him instead of Barry, and a lot goes on, and Golden Glider stays around for a good while, and this is probably the most significant she's ever been since then, and I really haven't seen her done much since, but yeah, this run actually made me really appreciate this character a lot more. Vengeance on Ice. And yeah, of course, this would actually continue to the next issue. But yeah, Golden Glider became a really big Flash rogue. But we are now going to move on to the hardcover collection that we have here, which covers a very significant story. So now we'll have a little more ground to work with. So this story is, well, I mean, it's in the title, so I gotta say it. It's the death of Iris West. Yes, Barry Allen loses his wife, at least for a little while. You know comics. We all know say dead forever. But anyway, let's open up this bad boy and let's take a look at this. All right, here we go. I actually really do like this this interior artwork here. But anyway, this is the Flash, the death of Iris West. So this is basically, as far as like collections go, this is basically the only thing we have in this era. Flash, death of Iris West, table of contents. So this doesn't go right into the actual issue where Iris dies. We have a little more like lead and build up here. So you can see more of Cary Bates' run here along with Irv Novik's art, which I really do like. I do appreciate his art. Get the story involving a clown. But one significant villain that shows up in here as well is a villain named Clive Yorkin. And he's not like a typical supervillain. Like, he doesn't have a costume, he doesn't have powers or anything like that. He's just a regular criminal. But unfortunately, he falls victim to an experiment that the CCPD, the Central City Police Department, tries doing, which is they try to reform their criminals with a certain machine that they experiment with. Unfortunately, that experiment goes awry, and it turns Clive into a raving lunatic maniac. So that's going to be a big part that plays in this story. As well as also this girl here. Her name is Melody. And she is actually a psychic telepath that could like control people's minds and memories. And one of the things that's interesting is she tries to control the Flash, which she does succeed at one point. So much so to the point she actually gets him to reveal his identity. Yes, more identity reveal in here. Let's skip around a bit here. Yeah, that's Melody. Now, one thing I like about this era, too, is that this is now the point where, for maybe, like, I want to say, I don't know exactly where you could pinpoint it, but a lot of the early Cary Bates issues are kind of more like, basically, standard comics at that time. Like, one-and-done stories and all that. But then I feel like this is around the time where comics were starting transitioning into more episodic format, where you still got some stories, but sometimes they would go for more than certain issues, and certain stuff that would be brought up in early issues will come back later on. Again, very episodic format. The stuff we're used to today. That's Clive Yorkin. We got a better picture of him here. Yep, there he is. Yeah, this is the machine that, like, it just goes wrong and screws with his mind, and he becomes a raving lunatic. And this was all part of an experiment that Barry and a couple of other scientists were involved with, but Barry wanted to duck out of it once he thought it was wrong to mess with people's minds. But the other doctors did not agree. Alright, and this is the issue. This is the issue where Iris dies. AKA, The Last Dance. So what's interesting about this story, this kind of wraps up the whole thing with Melody. She'll come back to play later on, but one of the things that's funny that goes on is Barry has like a lot of stuff going on during this time. Like, he's got a lot of stuff between Flash stuff, Central City, Barry Allen stuff, to the point where he's basically never home, and Iris basically thinks he's having an affair, or doesn't think he's paying attention to her, so of course she tries to get a new haircut. Barry Barry barely notices this, of course, because he's so, like, absent-minded sometimes. But one of the things that does happen here is he does get sent over to Melody, and he does take off the mask for her, only for her to be completely disappointed that Barry Allen just looks like an ordinary guy. Like, apparently she's not attracted to him and thinks Barry's just a dull guy. And I'm like, oh, well, excuse me. To the point, it actually has one of my favorite moments ever with Barry, where after the fact, he's so disappointed that, like, he's actually, let's see if I can find it. Where is it? Yeah, so there's actually one moment where Iris does find him and thinks the worst at first, and then realizes everything's okay. He explains what happens, but one of the moments that's great, I'm trying to find it. I can't find where it is. Sorry, I'm going for like 4 pages. I'm trying to find that specific moment. Okay, it's right here. It's this panel right here. Where he goes, ordinary? What blazes is that supposed to mean? I may not be Robert Redford, but I always thought I was sort of sexy. At least that's what Iris told me. And Iris, of course, does think he's sexy, and that actually reassures Barry a bit. And they eventually do get back together, and everything's all good. And one of the things they actually do decide is they finally decide, you know what? Let's have a baby. Let's change things up. We've been married for a while. Let's have a baby. And it's going to be a nice moment. And then, of course, things go awry when they go to this costume party. So, in case you're wondering on the cover, like, why is the Flash dancing with Batgirl? It's Iris dressed up as Batgirl. So, and one of the cool things about this costume party is, of course, being a superhero, being the Flash, Barry just decides, like, screw it, I'll just go as the Flash. You know? So, why not? Yeah. Things could do go wrong here. Yes, this is the end of the issue, where we do find out that, yes, Iris has been killed. Supposedly by Clive Yorkin. But we find out later on that that's not fully the truth. Barry, of course, having a hard time here for a while. I mean, who wouldn't? With the loss of his wife. Yeah, Iris' funeral. To the point where he almost contemplates giving up being the Flash. Like, he actually was going to do a whole press conference and announce that he was going to retire from being the Flash. Not as Barry, but as the Flash, saying, like, hey, I'm not going to be here anymore. But then, of course, his mind does change thanks to Melody helping him out, basically saying, like, no, this city still needs you. Just because you're down at the moment, Central City still does need you, and that gets his confidence back, and he still decides to become the Flash. And then we get a couple stories with Captain Boomerang. We got Heat Wave. And again, Clive York, if he's still around. Yeah, because one of the things that does happen is that Clive Orkin actually does get some powers later on, where he has the ability to, once he touches you, he can drain your life energy from you. So yeah, that's not good. And he's still the prime suspect. Like Flash still thinks that he's the one that killed Iris. So he's still after him. Melody gets involved at some point, helps them out. But eventually the truth will be revealed of who is the one that actually did kill Iris. Are you shocked? Are you really surprised? Who else would do such a horrible thing like kill Barry Allen's life than Eobard Thawne, a.k.a. the Reverse Flash? Yep. Reverse Flash did this. And why does he do it? It's actually pretty dark and sick. He basically does it because you see in a flashback that will happen later on that he goes to Iris to basically profess his love for her, and Iris, of course, rejects it, and Vaughn says, all right, well, if you're not going to love me, then you're not going to love anyone, and I'm going to kill you. And that's what he does. It's actually cool because Barry does eventually find out how it happens, because he looks back on a tape and sees exactly what happened, and he's able to see, of course, with his faster eyes, that Reverse Flash did it, coming in, coming out. And eventually we'll see how he actually does do it, and it's actually pretty brutal. This is actually one of my favorite covers. I love this cover. So yeah, so this is it. We get the flashback. And yeah, this is how he does it. He vibrates his hand through her brain, and that kills her. How messed up is that? That is revolting. But that is also why he is the best villain ever. But eventually Barry does find out, and they have a fantastic brawl. Some of these issues are great. Like I said, this run is very underrated. I really hope one of these days DC does collect it in Omni format. I would love to see it. Yeah, Flash gets lost in time at one point. But yeah. So also, and just to specify, these issues will collect Flash 270 through 284. Anyway, we will now move on. We're gonna jump ahead a bit. We're gonna jump over to the 300, specifically 323, where another significant moment happens here, and this is basically near the tail end of this series. So let's take a look. All right, so this is the Flash 323, where the Reverse Flash does eventually come back, because at the end of the last story, he gets lost in time because him and Barry go through like a time vortex, and eventually Fawn gets lost in time, but he finds his way back. It's actually pretty cool, because like I said, the last issue was like 284. This is Fawn's first appearance since 323, so that's a long time. Like, he was gone for a good while. And that's how you use your villains. You use them sparingly. But just gives a background and just give a little bit more of what's been going on at this time too. Barry does eventually move on. He meets a woman named Fiona Webb, and after a good while of like cute meets and flirting and some other crazy Flash shenanigans that happens, they eventually do fall in love, and they are going to get married. So, Barry Allen's having a happy day, right? Who's got to show up? Of course. Like Barry's hair here too. Definitely like now in like the more like late 70s, early 80s. Like I said, this run runs for a long time. This goes from like the 70s into like the 80s. Like, this is a long run. So that's Fiona. And unfortunately, Flash does find out what is going on. And as Fiona's like waiting and crying, like, where's Barry? Why is he not here? Because he's dealing with the Reverse Flash. Issue 324. Very big issue. So basically what happens in this issue is Flash and Fawn, they have a fight, they have a race. But what's interesting about this issue is that at one point, because Fawn chokes Barry out in the last issue, so because of that, Barry's throat is kind of messed up, his lungs are a little messed up. So for the entire issue, until the last page, Barry doesn't say a single word this entire issue. Like, you look at this, how he's taunting him, like, making, like, a ice sculpture of, like, Iris. But because of all this, what Fawn is, of course, doing is because he knows that Barry's going to get married again, he's going to go try and kill Fiona. And this is the moment, yeah, so right here, Fawn writes in the sand, guess who's going to kill your wife again? And this is finally where Barry speaks. No, you won't. Not again. And as Fawn is approaching Fiona, no, not again, not again, not... Barry grabs Fawn by the neck, but because of the speed and velocity, he breaks Fawn's neck. And it's the aftermath, 325. The death of the Reverse Flash. First of many. And Reverse Flash would stay dead for a long time. And I mean a long time. Like, I'll put it this way. I mean, we're going to get other versions of Reverse Flash in this reading order. But as far as the original Fawn goes, we're not going to see him for a good while. Or at least another version of him. But again, we'll get there. It's just the aftermath of everything. Fiona also ends up in the mental hospital for a bit because of all the tragedy that happens, and unfortunately, a lot of unfortunate stuff's going to happen to Fiona. I won't get too much into it because I don't want to spoil anything. But the issue does end where Flash brings himself to custody and is arrested for murder. And this is 326. I do love this cover. But I will say, as a Flash fan, this does make me really sad. This is probably one of the saddest. That's a kind of interesting thing about Carrie Bates' run, too. It's very sad, especially if you love this character as much as I do. It's like, Bates just puts him through, like, the ringer, man. And that's why it's actually one of my favorite runs, but it's also like, damn, this is hard to read. Like, even this here, you get this. You get his mugshot. 1983. He's going in there with all these other criminals that he's put away. Now the Flash is in jail. And because of this, Barry does have like a breakdown at one point where he just decides, you know what? My life's over. Barry Allen's dead. I'm just gonna be the Flash now. I'm not even gonna go out of the costume anymore. So a lot of other stuff does happen for a good while, and we're going to skip ahead a bit now. And now this is the start of the trial. The trial of the Flash. A very, very big Flash story. And this starts at 340, and this is going to go all the way to 350. So this is going to be the next 10 issues. I'm not going to show every issue, but just get a gist of what's going on. One of the other things that happens is... there's a villain named Big Sir, and he's not a villain per se, he's more of an innocent. Unfortunately, Big Sir is special needs, let's just say, And unfortunately, the rogues, Captain Cold, all of them kind of take advantage and tell Big Sur that Flash is an actual villain and that he should take him down. And of course, he ends up doing that at one point. That's actually Flash's lawyer, who we find out is actually not a big fan of him. Also, this character is actually Cecile Horton. Yes, Cecile Horton, who is just a character in the book, and she doesn't take over the book like her version of the show. But we'll leave it at that. But one of the things I started to say about this character is you find out she does have a certain past with the Flash, and she blames him for something that I won't get into, but more or less she basically decides to be his lawyer. Originally, Flash had another lawyer, but was killed in an explosion. Like I said, a lot of stuff happens in this run. It's crazy. Big Sur. And here we are. The trial begins. So now here we are. We're at the grand finale. Like I said, I skipped around a bit. We went from 340 to 350. This is the last issue in Volume 1 of The Flash. The volume that started all the way back in the Silver Age, going all the way from the Golden Age. This was the last issue until we got a new renumbering and a reboot. Well, not a reboot, but like a new start. So this is a double-sized last issue. So basically what happens at one point during the trial is Flash is found guilty. Flash is found guilty, and he ends up having to go to jail at some point, but then things get changed because one of the things that does happen is it is revealed later on that the jury does decide that Flash technically did kill Fawn in self-defense, and they were going to say he was not guilty. However, a certain influence, a certain other villain, who I won't spoil, decides to mess with the jury's mind, and because of that, they find him guilty. But then things get fixed up by another certain character that shows up to help the Flash, as well as the jury to show exactly what happened, to renew their memories and show, like, yes, Flash is not guilty. This character, by the way, who is just a simply ordinary man who's part of the jury, we find out that he's actually taken over and possessed by a certain character. So this is his run. Yeah, Barry's face gets messed up at one point by Big Sur, and he decides to change his face, because again, he just completely... Barry basically just goes mental in this. He basically just gives up on everything. He decides, you know what, I'm not Barry Allen anymore. I'm starting this whole new life. My life is done. He just gives up. This deals with the rogues as well. This is the gentleman I was talking about, the gentleman who is in the trial that decides to help. In the jury, I should say, not the trial. Just sit around here a bit. I mean, I'm sure you can probably see who the villain is by now, but like I said, I won't say if you don't notice, because I don't want to give the story away. But yes, Flash eventually does become cleared. And we go back, where after all this, even when Barry is cleared, Barry does decide, after he finds out who this person is, him and this person decide, you know what? Let's go away. Let's get out of here. Let's go live in the future. And that person who helped them out is Iris West. Iris is back. There's a lot of explanation of what happens, but Basically, what happens is her conscience gets transferred back to the future, and because of that, her conscience gets possessed into this other man, and she comes in to save Barry and all that. Like I said, it's crazy stuff. But yes, Iris does come back, and Barry and Iris do decide to finally live happily ever after, just live in the future, which they do, and they eventually do have some children, and they have some time together finally at last, but it won't be a happy ending forever. And we get to our bonus book today, Crisis on Infinite Earths. This is a huge event for DC Comics. This is actually one of the first comic events ever, really. But this is what resets everything for DC, starts everything anew when this event ends. But one of the things that does happen in this event is the fates of Barry Allen. Barry, during this event, is ended up being kidnapped by Psycho Pirate and the Anti-Monitor. I'm not going to get too much into the actual story of Crisis, but yeah, you see here, Batman sees his image. He's thinking, like, what's going on? Like, why is the flashlight fading like that? But yeah, a lot of stuff does happen in this event. But one of the most key moments here which I will show off as soon as I find it. It's a very famous cover. Crisis is a crazy book, though, but it's definitely something you, like, after the Carrie Bates stuff, if you want to continue this Flash read, or yeah, this is something you definitely want to read after, because this not only will show what happens to Barry, but leads into what's going to be happening for the future of the Flash. And here we are right here, Crisis on Infinite Earths number 8. A Flash of the Lightning. Barry eventually does break out. And sees one of the things that's happening is this antimatter cannon that is going to destroy a bunch of Earths. And Flash decides, well, I gotta save the day, I gotta do this. So he ends up going so fast to reverse the effects of it. But because he's going so fast too much that he's like going through time, doing all this stuff to the point where his body does give out. And he fades. And Barry Allen is dead. He is dead. Yep, The Flash, 1956 to 1985. And that is the end of Barry's run. But it's not all gloom and doom. Not all gloom and doom, Flash fans. Sorry, it's a little hard for me to hold the book right here. Yeah, this is the moment right here where Wally finds out he's dead. Wally West, of course, you remember, being the Kid Flash. He was in Teen Titans at the time, so he's not in Carrie Bates' run as much as he was in the Silver Age. Alright, sorry, I'm just trying to find the page. It's hard for me to hold it. Hold on. Okay. So it's basically right here. So from all the fallout of Crisis, one of the things that does happen is Wally West decides to honor his mentor Barry Allen. He takes the costume, and Wally West will now become the new Flash. And we will get into his origin and the beginning of his run next time.